All right, guys, welcome back to Kris versus Everybody. This is the podcast where I talk about anything and everything unedited, uncensored. Today, I'm going to be talking about a very important date in this nation's history. November 3rd, 2026. That is Election Day in the United States. A very important election. It's an election where we vote for people of the Senate and people of the House of Representatives. It's a very important day. It is called the midterm elections. All right, guys. If there's one thing we cannot afford to take granted, is our right to vote. Every 2 years in what we call the midterm elections, Americans from every state cast ballots for the members of the House of Representatives, the U.S. Senate, state legislators, governors, and countless other local offices that shape how our communities are governed. The next midterm elections are scheduled, like I said, for Tuesday, November 3rd, 2026. And what happens in those elections will determine the course of this country's future for years, not just months. We've seen in recent months politicians at the highest levels talk boldly about changing how elections are run. Some even suggesting that elections themselves could be nationalized or altered in ways that could undermine public trust in the process. President Trump has amplified rhetoric about talking or taking over elections and has backed proposals that would radically change voting rules, from strict photo IDs and citizenship requirements to limitations on voting for mail-in and absentees, which he also used a mail-in ballot. But it's okay. We're going to move on. Whether you call these efforts election integrity or you see them as a potential threat to accessible and fair voting, the fact is clear. Our democracy only works when people participate. Waiting on someone else to fix, quote unquote, what's happening or what's wrong with our government isn't enough. Your voice, your ballot, and your presence at the polls are the first line of defense against abuses of power. In the recent weeks and months, national parties are already mobilizing massive voter engagement programs aimed at getting people, especially those who haven't voted in years, back to the ballot box, because every vote truly matters in tight races for control of Congress. This year, the balance of power in Congress and the authority to provide oversight, pass laws, protect rights, and push back against policies that disagree with you is on the line. Whether it's debates over immigration enforcement, civil liberties, economic justice, or how federal agencies operate, the lawmakers we elect in November, on November 3rd, 2026, are those who decide our future. No one in Washington will protect your rights if you don't show up to protect them for yourself. So this is your moment. Register if you haven't already. Learn your state's deadlines and rules. Find your polling place or request your ballot early. Talk to your friends, your neighbors, your family, and even go with them to vote. Take 10 people with you. Don't wait for someone else. Don't assume others will show up, because history shows us that when people stay home, power shifts in ways that can erode the very freedoms we hold dear. This isn't just hyperbole. This is the reality of how democracy works. Our power isn't in fear. It is in the ballot box. And this November, we want to shape a future that reflects our values, protects our communities, and stand up to abuses of power. We must vote. Let's make sure our voices are heard, loud, proud, and decisive when we go to the polls. Vote on November 3rd, 2026. And that has been another episode of Kris versus Everybody. I have links for where you can actually find out where your voting places are, who is going to be up for election, which seats are up around across the country, and the 14th Amendment, the origins of that amendment for people who are curious. Okay. And the timeline for voting. How far we've come in this country. And we don't want to go back to what we were. We want to progress forward for easier ways to vote. So everyone of voting age can go to the polls. Spread this message, share the episode. Crisscross Studios on YouTube. Listen to the Kris versus Everybody podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. I'm your host, Kris Canty. See you guys next time.